evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves, and my esteemed partner, plugging away in his office somewhere in Maryland, Mr. John Webster.
Hey Gary, how you doing, man?
All right.
Some days, you don't get out of work on time, things happen, and it's nice to be able to have a work in the field where I work in, where I can put a basketball and a tennis ball and a soccer ball and football all behind me, so you can know this is a sports talk show, man.
Oh yeah, it looks like you got game tapes too back there.
Yeah, we can say that. Yeah, we can say that.
I mean, to the naked eye, it might be blurred out unless you got one of them fake backgrounds or something, but that don't look fake.
Hey, Gary, man, let me also say hey to our great friend and our great producer, John Pitt.
Greetings, fellas. Greetings.
Hey, before we get started, what I'd like to do, guys, and thank you for giving me the opportunity, is give a special hello, a special shout out to a good friend of mine. He went to college with me at Bowie State. Matter of fact, he was also in my wedding too. Special shout out to George Van Buren, as well as to his wife, Crystal. George is having some health concerns right now, but he's fighting through them and doing well and responding well to his treatments. We want to say hey to him. We want to say that he's in our thoughts and prayers.
Amen.
And keep hanging in there, and we'll get through this together. Take care, man. And take care, Crystal.
Stay strong. Stay strong. Well, in the absence of any real hard topics and things this week, that we've now entered the dog days of August. So only thing we can do is look at preseason football and look ahead to the coming season in football, but particularly in college football, where once again, Alabama is number one in the Associated Press preseason top 25. It's the fourth time in 6 years that Bama has formed the line for other schools to follow. And it's no surprise considering their stranglehold on college football for much of the past decade. Question is, will it change much this season? I mean, will anybody topple them atop the heap? What schools do you think, John, will knock off the Tide, even for 1 week?
Well, are you referring to maybe in a playoff that Notre Dame could knock off Alabama? Is that what you were trying to refer to, Gary?
I said, John, knock them off, not have pipe dreams.
Well, Alabama, you already know, they're a powerhouse, Gary. I mean, they're always going to be in the conversation about the playoffs. They're always in the Final Four right now, until maybe that may be getting changed to the 12-team playoff, but that's another conversation for another day, Gary. But they're up there. Clemson's up there. Who else was in the top five, Gary?
Well, I'll read it off for you. Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, and Georgia. Oh, yeah, Notre Dame is number 9, by the way.
And by the year 2025, 4 of those 5 teams will be from the SEC.
Yeah, they might as well call this the SEC top 25.
Well, I think they're going to be tough. You and I looked at the schedule earlier today. They got a tough game against Texas A&M. They also, every year, Auburn's going to be tough. That's the last game of the season, and they have to go to Auburn this year on November 27th. That's going to be tough. Throw records out the window for that. I think also, and Gary, you said you're not too sure about it yet, I think the game against Mississippi State or Mississippi could be tricky for them too. Mississippi last year scored almost 50 points in a loss to Alabama last year.
Yeah, I think that one was something of a shootout.
Yeah, and Kiffin is an offensive wonder, so you wonder what's going to happen. The thing with Mississippi State last year, Alabama beat them 41-0, but this year they got to go down to Mississippi State. Mike Leach is a very good coach, Coach Leach.
Never underestimate the Pirate.
Yeah, so I know you may disagree with me, but I got a little bit of my eye on both of those games to see what happens.
Yeah, well, as someone who covers Mississippi State for the AP, I mean, I think that they'll be much improved. Last year was something of an anomaly because Mississippi State had so many player exits, and again, I think that happens with a coaching change. But Leach is not everybody's cup of tea, and you really have to accept him for who he is. But again, with everything affecting college football teams in terms of practice, the Bulldogs, kind of. I mean, that was one of those games where a lot of their youth got exposed. I do think that they will be better. And of course, when you host Alabama, I mean, that's everybody's Super Bowl. So I do think that the potential's there for them to give them more of a game, definitely more than last year. The problem is, John, Alabama is still Alabama, always will be Alabama, which means they have NFL quality talent, 3D. And it's hard for teams right now to stop that. I do think Oklahoma has a chance. I mean, I think that they will run the table in their conference. Of course, I carry a torch for Ohio State personally, but I'm not real sure how good they are at first. The only thing with Alabama, of course, they'll be breaking in a new quarterback, and that's going to be an adjustment. And I'm sure after week one, you're going to hear Saban, talk about, how much we need to get better. He'll find something in a 56-0 victory, to pick about and everything. Part of that is coach speak, but part of that just shows the kind of expectations he has. But I do think it's going to be an adjustment for Alabama. I do think they will be challenged early. But again, it's like still when you're Alabama and you're beating teams by 6 or 7 touchdowns in the first couple of weeks of the season just to get your feet wet, get comfortable, that's a tough road for a lot of schools to try to overcome and try to hope that Alabama wobbles. What do you think?
The unbelievable thing with Alabama, they lost all their skill position players. Mac Jones, Dante, what's the Heisman Trophy winner's last name? Dante, he went to the Eagles. So they lost him. They lost the running back. And all they've done is reloaded. And looks like they're poised to make another run. And like you say, to play Alabama, you're their opponent. It's your Super Bowl. And when you get them at home, it's your homecoming and Super Bowl together at one time. So Coach Saban always has them very well prepared, ready to go. They're going to be tough to beat, Gary. I see them in the college football playoff again. Whether they win it or not is a whole nother story, but I see them getting there.
Yeah. I mean, we have to keep in mind, no school is really invincible. But again, when you talk about Alabama, that's a high bar for them, for any school to try to reach, just in terms of being competitive with them. I do think it's possible, but I think it's going to take probably a month and catch them on a bad week. Speaking of college football, how confident should we be that this season won't be interrupted by the Delta variant? I mean, as classes begin on many college campuses, they're figured to be students or student athletes even who are unvaccinated. And of course, what the risk in that is, John, especially if mask mandates or mask requirements aren't followed. But more to the point, will many schools' plans for full attendance at games proceed as planned, or will they be altered as crowds form and the potential for the variant spreading takes form? Potentially.
Well, very good questions, Gary. They're going to start the season off with full capacity. Conferences like the SEC, the Big Five conferences, they're going to have the finances and the money to do testing on a frequent basis to make sure players are doing what they should be doing. That's going to continue. This Delta variant right now is spreading. They say it's more contagious than COVID-19. We're going to have to see what's going to happen. Areas like, Florida is in the SEC, and that's an area that seems to have some challenges with this new variant. You got Texas. Texas has some concerns with it as well too, and you got Texas A&M in that conference. It remains to be seen what's going to happen. Last year, like the SEC, they only played SEC schools, so pretty much the rules and regulations and policies were pretty much SEC, and you did what you could and did what you were told to do by the SEC and the powers that be. This year, you're going back to your open scheduling, so you may play a team in the like Alabama is playing Miami or Florida in the first week of the season. Then the second week they're playing Mercer. So the question becomes, are these teams going to have the same policies and procedures and protocols in place that they have to follow in the SEC? ACC, I think, will probably have, because that's a Big Five conference and they are trying to get to the college football playoff. So we'll have to see how that's going to play out, man, because I don't bet. And if I did, I definitely wouldn't take a bet on how far they get in the season, because it's really going to be a big question, because you also have the situation, as you mentioned, Gary, some are vaccinated, some are not vaccinated. How's that going to play out? Somebody gets the variant, gets sick, spreads. It's a rough situation that I don't know about you, Gary. I'm glad I don't have to make a lot of decisions about it, because it has the, well, not has, it does. I'm not going to have to say has potential. It does affect many, many people across the board.
Yeah. John, I think one thing I'm encouraged about with this season is that many schools are approaching 90% vaccination rates. So, I mean, you have a few holdouts, for personal reasons. Of course, that seems to be the overriding thing about this vaccine, personal choice, which the schools respect. And of course, you see little anecdotal stories about some athletes initially resistant to it, but eventually coming around for the good of the team. And I think that's what coaches feel like. Okay, that's their hope, that they will come around and you get closer to, say, 100%. But I do think 90%. In many cases, of course, with some of these conferences really, really stressing it, with threats of forfeiture, that sort of thing, has brought a number of these schools and a number of these players in line, even if they don't necessarily agree with it. I mean, the one thing, when you're on a team, it's much bigger than you, and that mentality, that philosophy, I think, is what has brought more athletes into the fold to get vaccinated, not so much for themselves, but for their teammates.
Agree with you, Gary. Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Now, it's in terms of spectators, I don't really know what to make of that. I do think that there is flexibility in terms of adjusting crowd capacities that will likely be on a state by state basis, and a lot of it will depend on again how this thing really takes hold nationally. So I think even in that case, I still feel relatively confident that we'll stay close to full attendance, because again, if you can get over 50%, get closer to 60%. Again, that's not ideal, but it's a number that's going in the right direction.
Yep.
Yeah. So speaking of COVID, and this is a topic that developed after we taped last week, but Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson kind of stunned a lot of folks when he returned from his second 10-day quarantine from COVID to say that he wouldn't get a vaccine, and he called it a personal decision. At what point do the Ravens or his teammates make it, their point, or make it the team's point, and make it known that that's not going to fly, especially since the NFL is considering docking teams' paychecks and forfeiting games for those that still won't get vaccinated?
I think you just answered your own question. And I don't mean that rudely towards you, but the NFL has instituted policies now where if you forfeit a game and it's because a player on your team had it, then you nobody's getting paid
On either team.
on either team. Now all of a sudden you've gone into everybody's pocket, and your personal preference is still your personal preference, but you better make sure you're being doubly safe, because now all of a sudden your decision or no decision can affect 46 others on your football team. Oh, how many was it? 45, 46 on the football team? 47?
Well, 53.
53. Okay, it can affect 52 other people. And that's rough. I mean, you have those who think they should not get vaccinated. They feel as if it's their personal preference, and they feel as if vaccination is not guaranteed. You can still get sick. So it's what they choose. It's unfortunate that their thoughts are where they are, but hopefully, people will be able to move forward. Maybe one thing that happened today will help the rest of the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons were the first team today in the NFL to be listed as 100% vaccinated. Everybody on the team is vaccinated, which is good, and I applaud them. Maybe we can continue to try to move forward. You rough situations. The Washington football team, they for a while were at 60% or maybe below 60. I think they moved into 80% now. And I give Coach Rivera a lot of credit, because he does a lot of time talking to players and trying to counsel them and educate them on the pros and cons of getting the vaccination and not getting the vaccination. So hopefully more people will become educated or continue to read, become even more educated, and decide to take the vaccination.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day, John, when you're an athlete and you want to play the game, you will do anything to make sure you can get on the field or on the court, and make sure that your team can get on the field or on the court. And again, just like we were saying in college, it's bigger than, say, just you. It's not just about you. It's about your team. It's about the city you represent or the school you represent. And the only thing, again, you can't be heavy-handed in this, but I think you have to get some of the, I guess to say, the holdouts to really look at the big picture, because, again, at the end of the day, it's about that big fat ring. At the end of the year, I should say, it'll be about that big fat ring. And you don't want to miss any chance, any game, toward that end. You don't want to miss any time if you can help it.
And you're going to have that player. You're telling me I'm not going to be able to play for a ring, and you're also telling me you took some money out of my pocket. I don't think I want to be in that locker room, Gary, to hear how that conversation is going to end up.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure that Ravens locker room was pretty lively after his press conference last week.
And they are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And Lamar Jackson is one of the most electrifying and one of the top quarterbacks in the league, if not one of the top players in the league. And to have him injured or in COVID protocol is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate, because on a Sunday or a Monday night, if the Ravens are playing the Kansas City Chiefs, you want to see Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. You don't want to see the backup.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of quarterbacks that we want to see on the field, I saw a story a couple of days ago that says Dallas Cowboys Dak Prescott, his health is proceeding along a lot better than we thought. Early in camp, he missed a couple of days, had another examination on his shoulder, but it turns out that there's not much to it. That he's proceeding as planned from that. From my standpoint, as a football fan, I want to see Dak back out on the field, especially after he suffered such a gruesome injury. And like you said, we want to see the best players on the field if possible. But for preseason, does it really matter if he plays or not?
Well,
And I want John Pitt to chime in on that as a Dallas Cowboy fan if he can.
well, I guess you may want to let John chime in because he could talk about how Dak's going to lead them to another 8 or 9 win season, and maybe a second or third place finish in the NFC East.
Careful.
You got your numbers a little mixed up there. It's probably going to be 10 wins, 10 or 11 wins. I think Dak will be fine. I mean, just to talk about him, just to hear that he might not play, I think it's just a typical thing where everybody loves to talk about Dallas, whether it's good news or bad news, right?
Yeah.
And plus, we don't have a choice. He has to play. He has to start. We have no backups at this point. So I'm confident he's going to be fine this year.
Who is the backup in Dallas now, John?
We got Cooper Rush. We still got Ben DiNucci. I don't know the other guy. We don't have any backups. So he has to.
I'll say this. I think the Cowboys, all jokes aside, are going to be a better team this year. The defense is definitely going to be a lot better. Dan Quinn is there. Mike Nolan is no longer the defensive coordinator there. I think some of the struggles and challenges they faced last year, they won't. You got 2 great bookends on defense, the defensive ends, and Lawrence and Gregory. That's really good. That they got to shore up that secondary a little bit, get that tightened up some. But you look at the offensive side, Gary and John. Come on, you got Amari Cooper, you got Ezekiel Elliott, and you got Dak Prescott. And each one of those names I called, you're talking about guys who are in the top 3 to 5 in their position in the NFL. And their offense is, they're going to put some points up on the board. I don't think Dak Prescott needs to play a preseason game this week, Gary, but, maybe the third game he needs to really get himself ready to go and then go from there. And I give John Pitt a hard way to go about the Cowboys, but I can see them this year winning 10, maybe 11 games.
Yeah.
And, Gary, I didn't answer your question. I think he should play. I disagree. I want to see if he can move around, all that kind of stuff. I think the earliest he can get in, the better.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think preseason games matter as much in the real big picture in terms of the starting lineup. But when you're coming back from an injury like that, I do think he needs to get snaps. Just to get in the flow, they need to establish that chemistry. And yeah, I do think he needs to play. And with a reduced preseason this year in particular, that he's got to get out there sooner than later. So John Pitt, what else we got coming up today?
So we actually have another question from a viewer. This is a Washington football team fan. And he first says, I think that the Washington football team should change their name to FC Washington or Washington FC, following what European soccer clubs do. So the FC stands for football club. And he asked you and John here, what do you think the new name of the team should be, if they should change it at all?
John, I'm going to let you start off on that one.
Yeah, let me get in trouble, right?
Well, you made a very good informed, argument before the show.
Well, I right now I like Washington football team. I think that's what they've been going with. I know that's what they went with last year. They're going to do it again this year. I like Washington Football Club. I think it's unique, and I kind of like it with that soccer kind of spin on it, which is what a lot of the soccer teams are doing. I really like that. As I said before the show, if they could, and hopefully with me saying this, I'm not trying to be politically incorrect, please, but if it is not incorrect, and I'm not meaning as a Native American term, but Washington Warriors would be a name that is not out there. They've decided not to use that. And I would look at the helmets that they used back in 1970 for that, or really, honestly, what I would really like to do, the helmet that they had in 1971, George Allen's year, which was a yellow helmet with an R, I would go with a yellow helmet and put a W on it. And honestly, do you know where that came from, Gary and John? Do you know where that idea came with the R? Do you know how it came about?
Nah, let us know, John.
So when Vince Lombardi came to coach back then the Washington Redskins, and he had come from Green Bay, he wanted to put a flavor of Green Bay to the Washington program. Green Bay helmets had G's on them. So he wanted to put an R on the helmet to represent back then, which would have been Redskins, which we no longer say because that's not a politically correct term that is used. So that's why I say put a W on the helmet for Washington. That's what I would like to see. And really, I would like to see the uniforms throw back to like the 70s or 71 with the yellow pants, which they have now, but the different kind of sleeve, the 71 type of a sleeve, that's what I would go with, or maybe even the 69 sleeve. Reminds me of what they did with the New York Jets back when Parcells was there. They went with the throwbacks from when they won the Super Bowl. And I just really like that. I'm not a Jets fan per se, but I really like
Giants. Well, no, I'm sorry. No, you're right. Right. When Parcells coached the Jets, that's right.
Yeah.
He coached both.
Yep, he coached both sides of New York.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I like Washington football team. I know they had some discussions out there about Washington Commanders, Washington Generals, Washington Presidents, the Red Dogs, the Red Wolves. None of those nicknames do anything for me. Washington football team is what I would go with. And, since we're talking about it, Washington football team, and give me a helmet not with a number on it like Alabama. Give me a helmet with a W on it.
Yeah. I've thought about this, John, and, while some might argue it's a cop-out to go with Washington football team, I just don't, and it's not about finding a name that pleases everybody, because there's going to be a segment that are still going to say, well, why not go back to the old name? Well, that ain't happening, okay? But I do think that Washington football team is unique. The only problem, like say, with considering FC Washington or Washington FC is that the league will not approve it. The owners will not approve it. Why? Because they don't want anything that can throw off the meaning of what the NFL stands for. We know, I'm a soccer aficionado myself, and at times I've called it football, like a lot of other soccer fans or football fans, John Pitt included, but they don't want anything that distinguishes from the brand, from the shield, from any kind of connotation of a sport other than the National Football League as they've established it. And again, I think it's worthy of being considered, because anything is in play here, but we continue to talk about Washington football team as a name, and the more you talk about it, just like if you change the name of a stadium or something, yeah, they'll call it that stadium, that old name for a year, but then as time goes on, they become more, it just starts to roll off the tongue a lot better. Much like how the Bullets changed it, or the Wizards changed their name from the Bullets back in the 90s. There were some people that put the names together and called them the Buzzards, which you can draw your own conclusions about that. But now everybody refers to them as what? The Wiz, right? It's like, change is hard, especially with sports fans. And I think as we get into year 2 with WFT, and I have to make sure I say WFT as opposed to the other way around, that, it might start to stick. But I agree with you, put a W on the helmet. The numbers are fine and that sort of thing. But that W now seems to be kind of unique, much like the curly W for the Nationals.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But John, I guess to hit home, your brother has a very good point, or your friend has a very good point. But I like Washington football team.
And I do want to acknowledge that was Chris, my brother from Washington, D.C., Northwest
Right.
Washington, D.C.
Sorry
All right.
about that, John.
But hey, thanks for the question. Well, folks, we got to wrap it up now. It's been fun. As we go into these dog days of August, enjoy sports in any way, shape, or form. Who knows what we'll talk about next week. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks for your support. Tell all your friends about us on Facebook and Twitter and otherwise. John, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, I've enjoyed myself again with both of you. It's been a great show, another great week of sports. And let me follow up on what Gary said. Go to Facebook or go to YouTube. Give us a like. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you watching the shows. Come back and see us again next week. You all have another great and safe week. Take care.
All right. Take care.